This submission is a philosophical script titled, "Give Me 11 Minutes, Your Life Will Start Making Sense," arguing that listeners should stop treating life like a math problem to solve and instead experience it like a flowing river.
Right. It's a really fascinating premise.
Definitely. But let's just dive straight into the feedback here, starting with the core completeness and focus of these.
The script's dismissal of practical life goals as mere furniture risks alienating listeners who require a framework to balance present awareness with undeniable real-world pressures.
Yeah, because we have this foundational metaphor right at the top, right? The author defines existence itself as the room, while, our careers, relationships, bank accounts, those are all just the furniture inside it.
Exactly. It's a really striking visual, and it immediately sets up this big dichotomy between just being alive and the heavy societal pressure to, constantly achieve.
And the material makes a strong case for the profound value of existence over external accomplishments. By highlighting that contrast, it paints this compelling picture of how we obsess over rearranging the chairs while completely ignoring the room itself.
Right. We ignore the vast, quiet space that actually holds everything.
Yeah, but the weakness really emerges when the text anticipates the listener's pushback. Because, the listener inevitably thinks, okay, sure, but what about my career? What about the fact that I have a mortgage to pay?
Yeah, well, how do I feed my family?
Exact. And it's like telling someone drowning in debt that money is just a social construct. It might be philosophically true, but it doesn't help them pay the utility bill.
Is the connection between the theoretical piece of the room and the practical necessity of the furniture fully established in the material, or is that an area to potentially bolster?
I'd say it definitely needs bolstering.
Because right now the text it waves those valid concerns away as secondary furniture arrangement questions,
Right.
By telling the listener they are trying to answer these practical questions before acknowledging the room even exists, the script totally fails to provide a logical bridge.
Yeah, it leaves the listener with this great philosophical truth, but absolutely zero practical ways to navigate, the biological and societal reality of needing to work and build.
And when a philosophical text invalidates the immediate physiological reality of the reader, the brain literally flags the philosophy as a threat.
Oh, totally. We are biologically wired to care about the furniture. If you don't arrange it so you can eat and sleep safely, that room gets super uncomfortable very quickly.
That biological imperative is exactly what's missing here. The human brain is essentially this predictive processing engine, right? It evolved to forecast the future and anticipate threats.
Secure resources, all of that.
Exactly. So telling it to just stop forecasting is like telling a heart to stop beating. If the text treats planning as a spiritual failure rather than a survival mechanism, it's setting up an impossible standard.
So what's the suggestion here? How do they fix that?
The author needs to validate the necessity of the furniture rather than diminishing it, and introduce the concept of mindful action. Basically, teach the listener how to arrange the furniture without falsely believing the furniture is the room itself.
Okay, yeah. But how do we actually anchor that concept into the prose? What does that look like on the page?
Well, the author needs to state explicitly that planning for the future isn't inherently a distraction. The issue isn't the act of planning. It's the total identification with the plan.
Right.
For a concrete example, you can plan for a job interview without believing the outcome dictates your fundamental worth as a human. We need a vivid scenario in the text depicting someone making a major career choice from a place of calm presence rather than from a place of panic.
Oh, I love that. Because if I'm the listener, I want to see what living in the room actually looks like on a random Tuesday morning when I'm staring at a chaotic spreadsheet.
Exactly.
If you show me that by not tying my identity to my job, my mind is clearer, my cortisol levels are lower, and I make sharper decisions, that changes everything.
It proves that presence actually enhances our ability to handle the practical world. It frames mindfulness as a cognitive tool, not an escape hatch.
Yeah, which is huge for the analytical list. They realize they don't have to choose between spiritual peace and worldly competence.
They fuel each other.
Right, but moving on to the tone and style, because the script currently struggles to ground its philosophy in that practical reality, it accidentally overcompensates in the next section by leaning into these mystical, serendipitous solutions.
A significant tonal contradiction exists when the text explicitly denies being magic or manifestation, while immediately relying on mystical examples of cosmic serendipity to prove its point.
Yeah, Let's look closely at the section discussing how things naturally resolve once you stop forcing them. The text argues that if you surrender the grand narrative, certain people enter your life exactly when you need them, and problems just dissolve on their own.
Right. It gets very cosmic, very fast.
And then, almost in the next breath, the author insists, this isn't magic or manifestation or any of that. Doesn't this contradiction risk making the author sound like an unreliable narrator?
Oh, completely.
We are told to abandon the grand narrative, only to be handed a different kind of cosmic safety net.
That makes sense, but could the evidence also support a different conclusion? Like the idea that the author is simply trying to describe a profound psychological shift in perspective rather than a literal shift in the universe?
I mean, the intent is definitely psychological, yeah, but the weakness is the specific language they use. The vocabulary points outward to the universe, not inward to the psyche.
Right. It says the universe coordinates the perfect timing.
Exactly. To a deeply analytical listener, that sounds exactly like manifestation. And it undermines the grounded philosophy they're trying to build, you know? It makes the piece seem conditional on the universe magically fixing your problems behind the scenes.
Which creates a super dangerous false promise. If the listener stops worrying, and then a massive financial problem doesn't magically dissolve, they'll just assume the philosophy is broken.
Or that they're doing it wrong.
Yeah, so the suggestion here is to resolve this by grounding these positive outcomes in observable psychological shifts in perception, rather than external magical interventions.
Okay, so we need to rewrite the causality. Let's look at the claim that problems dissolve on their own. How do we rewrite that to reflect psychological reality?
We explain the cognitive mechanics of anxiety. It's like trying to find your keys in a dark room while a fire alarm is blaring, right?
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
The universe didn't magically put the keys on the table when you surrendered. You just turned on the lights and stopped panicking long enough to see them.
Right.
So instead of saying the problem vanished, rewrite it to explain that when the panic clears, the cognitive load lightens. The mind can finally process the logical solutions that were always sitting right there.
The capacity to solve it returned because you stopped wasting neurological energy on panic. That shifts the power dynamic entirely back to the listener.
Exactly. It gives them agency.
And what about that line regarding people entering your life exactly when you need them?
That is the perfect place to introduce the concept of the reticular activating system, the RAS.
Oh, yeah, the filter in our brainstem?
Right. It determines what sensory information gets our conscious attention. If your brain is obsessed with career stress, your RAS literally filters out the people around you who are trying to connect.
It's just blind to them.
Yep. So reframe that section to say, you finally become open and present enough to notice the people who have been trying to connect with you all along. They didn't fall out of the sky on a cosmic timetable.
Your brain just finally allowed you to perceive them. That maintains the profound beauty of the realization, but roots it firmly in neuroscience.
And it honors the analytical listener who would normally reject magical thinking.
Yeah, making the text absolutely bulletproof to skepticism. It prepares the listener for the reality that the external world won't always comply, but their internal capacity to handle it will improve.
Exactly. However, and this brings us to the structure and flow, this current reliance on vague serendipity causes the script to sort of spin its wheels structurally in the second half.
Oh yeah, the pacing in the second half loses momentum by continually reiterating the core thesis of permission to not know, rather than advancing the listener's journey toward application.
It's a classic trap in inspirational writing. The author hits a profound truth, and then they just fall so in love with it that they keep turning it over and over, showing it from different angles, instead of asking the reader to do something.
Okay, so what I really like about this part is the powerful realization that not knowing is okay. The concept that true freedom comes from seeing through the stories we make up. It's an incredibly strong peak to the argument.
It really is. It shifts paradigms.
But then the momentum just stalls. It feels like the author has guided the listener to the top of a magnificent mountain, but instead of letting them look at the view, we keep talking about how great our hiking boots are.
Is there a risk that focusing solely on reiterating the thesis might overlook the listener's readiness to act? Because when you look at the back half, it circles the exact same realization repeatedly.
Yeah, we get, you've been not knowing your whole life and then not waiting for your life to start.
And waiting for permission. They're all redundant variations of the exact same thought.
And the weakness is that the text repeatedly returns to those river and flow metaphors, which just totally stagnates the energy.
Right. The listener has already bought into the premise. They climb the mountain with you. but the text keeps trying to convince them.
It's a trust issue. The author needs to trust that the argument has landed. When you repeat a point like that, you don't deepen the emotion, you just dilute its power.
And the reader starts to skim.
Exactly. So what's the structural fix?
The suggestion is to restructure the final third to progress linearly from the internal realization to the external immediate experience of this new mindset. It has to evolve from conceptual thought to somatic experience.
Okay, but how do we physically write that transition? What are the concrete, actionable changes?
First, do a ruthless audit of the closing paragraphs and cut the redundant callbacks to the river metaphor. The river did its job in the intro. We don't need to keep checking the water level.
Right.
Remove all those phrases circling the drain of "you don't need to figure it out." Just find the sharpest version of that sentence, keep it, and delete the rest.
Less is more. Stripping away the repetition makes the surviving sentences hit with so much more force. But then, what fills the void left by those cuts?
Sensory visualization. Replace those repetitive sentences with a sharp, concluding visualization that actually propels the listener into the physical world. Describe exactly how their immediate next physical action will feel different now that the mental weight is gone.
Oh yeah. So instead of ending on abstract flow, bring it right into the room they are sitting in.
Exactly.
Because if I'm the reader, that visualization is the moment the philosophy clicks. Like closing the laptop and noticing the physical weight of my feet on the floor proves the thesis instantly. I'm no longer trapped in my inbox anxiety. I'm just an organism in a room.
Tell the listener, notice how the temperature of the doorknob feels against your hand when you aren't mentally living 5 years in the future.
I love that.
Notice how quiet the room actually is when the internal narration shuts up. Describe putting the phone face down. Describe walking into the hallway and breathing the ambient air, entirely free from the ghostly weight of the future.
That grounds the whole journey into a visceral reality. It transitions it from a theoretical lecture into an experiential meditation.
When a writer bridges that gap between high-level philosophy and a sensation of touching a doorknob, they create something that is practically impossible to forget.
Absolutely. All right, let's bring all these threads together. So first, reconciling the room metaphor by introducing mindful action ensures the listener has a logical bridge between existence and practical life.
Right. Honoring their biological need to plan.
Second, grounding mystical examples in psychological reality, like cognitive load and the RAS, maintains a consistent tone and keeps the analytical brain engaged. And finally, trimming repetitive metaphors in the second half to make room for sensory visualization propels the listener forward into physical action. To the author, I warmly invite you to take these actionable suggestions, experiment with the structure and the psychology of the piece, rewrite the material, and submit it back to us for another round of feedback and a future critique. The core concepts here are incredibly strong and deeply liberating.
It's simply a matter of refining the delivery so it hits the reader with maximum impact. Constructing a persuasive script requires building a bridge strong enough for the reader to actually walk across. Keep building, keep refining, and we'll see you next time.